The silence around grief can be deafening, but it was the silence they demanded that cut deepest. The morning after my wife's funeral, Claire showed up with a planner in one hand and a polite smile pasted on her face. "I've arranged the meeting with Mom's attorney," she said, without asking. "Let's just keep it simple and smooth." Then she hesitated, eyes darting away from mine. "And maybe don't say anything at the will reading. It'll be smoother that way." I nodded numb, but inside something shifted. My wife and I had spent 50 years building a life, raising Claire, loving her through every rebellion and heartbreak. And now she wanted me silent, as if I were just a burden to shuffle aside in the final act. "I'll be there," I said quietly. "I'll listen." She didn't hug me. She just handed me a printout with the address and said, "You'll need to sign a few things after." Later that night, I sat alone at the dining table with my wife's locket in my hand. I opened it slowly. Her photo still smiled up at me, creased at the corners, just as it had when I'd first tucked it in there 40 years ago. My thumb ran across the tiny hinge, and I heard her voice in memory. "If anything ever happens, speak your heart. Don't let them muffle you." I had trusted Claire, maybe too much. After her mother passed, I let her handle the documents because I was drowning in grief. She said she was just tidying things up, consolidating the accounts, reviewing the will, arranging the memorial. I wanted to believe she was helping, but lately I wasn't sure. If anyone's listening, don't make the mistake I did. Don't hand over your voice just because you're tired. The day of the will reading arrived. The lawyer's office smelled of leather and stale coffee. I sat in the waiting room while Claire spoke to the receptionist. Mark was already inside, probably giving instructions. Evan hadn't even shown up. Claire walked over, her heels tapping on the tile. "Just remember, Dad, this isn't the place for surprises. Let Mr. Talbot handle it." I looked up at her. Her suit was sharp, her hair pinned back, expression unreadable. Somewhere behind that mask was the daughter I once carried on my shoulders through autumn leaves. "I'm not here to cause problems," I said. "Good," she smiled too quickly. Inside the conference room, I sat at the long table across from Claire and Mark. The chairs felt too large, the lights too white. Mr. Talbot shuffled papers without looking at me. As he began to read, I folded my hands and said nothing. But inside, my fingers curled slowly around the locket in my pocket, pressing it against my palm like a vow. I wouldn't stay silent forever. It started like any other formal reading, a polished desk, files stacked neatly, the sharp scent of lemon polish in the air. Mr. Talbot cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and began. "This is the last will and testament of Margaret Elaine Whitmore, dated." I didn't hear the date. Not really. My focus drifted to Claire, sitting across the table with her legs crossed, hands folded neatly on top of her knee. Mark sat beside her, expressionless, chewing gum like he was waiting for an Uber. My son Evan, younger, softer in tone, kept looking down at his shoes as if he didn't want to be there at all. I tried to stay calm to listen, but something was off. "As per her wishes," Mr. Talbot continued, "the estate shall be divided in accordance with the outlined provisions. The family home will transfer to Claire Whitmore, with full rights of residency and equity. The remaining assets, including the liquid funds and retirement accounts, will be divided between the surviving children, with Claire assuming the role of primary executor." "Wait," I said gently. I thought there was something about the charitable trust." Claire didn't look at me at first. Mr. Talbot glanced down at his paperwork, lips pressed thin. I leaned forward. My wife and I agreed. There was supposed to be a charitable trust for the Veterans Hospice in her name. We discussed it for months. It was in the last draft. Claire's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Dad, we talked about simplifying things. That clause was more symbolic than anything. The paperwork got complicated." "It wasn't symbolic," I said a little firmer. "It was what she wanted." Mark leaned back, arms folded. Maybe she changed her mind before the final signing. people do that. I looked to Evan. He wouldn't meet my eyes. She told me, I said. Right there by the garden window. She said, no matter what, the Veterans Fund gets 10%. We're not going to die with our hands clenched. Claire's voice turned honeyed but cold. Dad, please, let's not make this difficult. Everything was handled legally. It's done. The room felt tighter. I glanced at Mr. Talbot again, but he avoided my gaze. I wanted to shout, to stand up and demand answers, but something in Claire's tone, in the way Mark smirked, in how Evan sat motionless, it all screamed one thing: they think I won't fight. I settled back in my chair, my chest tight, my hands folded to still the tremor. Margaret's voice echoed in my head. We'll split everything fairly, and if they ever forget that, remind them. I didn't know how yet, but I knew one thing as I looked around that room: something had been changed. And they were hopping I wouldn't notice. The drawer creaked louder than I remembered. That old mahogany desk had been my wife's domain. She stored everything in it. Old receipts, our mortgage papers, even the first letter I ever wrote her from basic training. But tonight, I was looking for one thing: the last draft of her will. The one with the red paperclip. I pulled open every folder, every envelope, spreading them out across the dining room table. Dust scattered with each flap. My hands moved faster, more desperate. Legal pads, pension statements, our marriage certificate, but no will. Not the version we'd reviewed together. Not the one she signed last fall, the one with her handwriting next to the charitable clause. The red paperclip was missing. I called Claire. No answer. Tried again. Voicemail. I left a message trying to sound calm. Just wondering if you've seen the latest version of Mom's will, the one she kept in the desk. Give me a call. She texted back 5 minutes later. I took care of all the paperwork. Everything been submitted. Try to relax, Dad. Red heart. Try to relax. I sat back in the wooden chair and stared at the screen. That smiley heart at the end, it felt like a stamp over a locked door. I didn't remember giving her permission to go through the desk, but I had been so dazed those first few days, so broken. Maybe I did, or maybe she just helped herself. The next morning I went to the mailbox. Empty. Again. Third day in a row. I asked the mailman as he passed the next house. He told me politely that Claire had submitted a change of address form. All your mail being rerouted to your daughter's place. She said you were moving in with her. I was. I called the bank. After a long hold, the woman on the line said my online access had been disabled due to new account management privileges. She said Claire was now listed as co-manager for my checking. I didn't even know that was possible. The shock cracked somewhere into suspicion, then into stillness. It was like I'd gone from being a father to being a file, a set of numbers she could reorganize. That night I sat in the dark with the only light coming from the hallway. My phone rested on the table. I opened the voice recorder. My thumb hovered for a second before I pressed it. This is for me, I whispered. Margaret, they've started tightening the noose. It's not just the will, it's everything now. The mail, the money, the decisions. I paused, took a shaky breath. Don't confront, collect. I ended the recording, saved it, labeled it Entry 1. Some wars aren't loud. Some start in quiet rooms with missing pages and forced smiles. But I wasn't going to let mine end there. The bank smelled like furniture polish and quiet panic. I hadn't been inside in years. Margaret always handled the details. She liked the routine of it. But today, I stepped up to the counter and asked to speak with the branch manager, voice low and steady. He came out in a blue tie and polite smile, though I saw it falter slightly when I said my name. I'd like to review the trust account, I said. Margaret Whitmore's trust. I believe I'm listed as co-trustee. He hesitated, not long but long enough. Of course, Mr. Whitmore. Just give me a moment to pull that up. He led me into a glass-walled office. I sat down across from his desk, my hands folded to hide the shake. He tapped on his keyboard too fast, too eager to get through it. Then he frowned. There was a change 2 weeks ago. It looks like access rights were modified. Claire Whitmore is now listed as the primary. Modified by whom? I asked. He shifted uncomfortably. According to our system, the authorization letter came in signed by you, sir. I stared at him. I never signed any authorization letter. He cleared his throat. Would you like to see it? Yes. He slid the paper across. My name at the bottom, my handwriting near identical, the loops, the tilt, even the small flick in the tail of the W in Whitmore. But I hadn't written it. The ink shimmered faintly under the office light, too fresh, not aged paper, not something filed long ago. I forced my face to stay still. Could I have a printed copy of this, and the date stamp showing when it was submitted? He nodded, of course. When he left to print it, I caught the assistant outside glancing in, whispering something to the woman beside her. I knew that look, the pity reserved for old men who don't know they've already been robbed. He returned. I thanked him, took the folder, and walked out without another word. Back home, I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the papers. My fingers pressed against the forged signature until the ink bled faintly onto my skin. I unlocked my phone, scrolled until I found the last saved voicemail from Margaret, the one I couldn't bring myself to delete. Hi, love. Just wanted to say I added the hospice clause to the will draft this morning. I know you're nervous about how they'll take it, but I trust you. Promise me, no matter what, you'll protect what we built. I'll see you soon. Her voice, soft and clear, played through the speaker like a memory walking through the room. I whispered, I will, love, I will. Then I opened my desk drawer and slid the forged documents beside my journal. They had no idea what I was capable of remembering or collecting. Helen lived alone in a modest house tucked behind an ivy-covered fence, the kind of place that smelled like old books, lemon polish, and quiet defiance. She'd been Margaret's closest friend for over 30 years, and before she retired, she was the only lawyer Margaret ever trusted. I didn't call ahead. I just showed up, envelope in hand, heart heavy in my chest. When she opened the door and saw my face, she didn't ask questions. She just said, "Come in, Arthur." I sat across from her at the kitchen table, the same table where our wives once shared recipes and whispered secrets. I slid the envelope toward her. What is it? My daughter forged my signature, I said, on the trust account. She rerouted my mail, altered the will, took over everything, and I let her because I was grieving. Helen didn't flinch. She opened the folder slowly, her eyes sharp as they scanned the fake authorization letter, the bank printout, and my journal entry. She said nothing for several minutes. Then finally she looked up and said, "They underestimated you." I laughed once bitterly. I underestimated me. She placed the documents aside. You're not the first elder they've tried to silence, but the paper always speaks, Arthur, always, especially when it's dirty. What can I do? Helen leaned forward, lowering her voice as if Claire might hear us through the walls. First, we document everything. I'll pull the original filings from the county. If they filed a revision, it'll have metadata, timestamps, witness signatures, and digital fingerprints. You'll start collecting anything digital, emails, bank logs, call records. They've locked me out of most of it, I said. You still have your phone. I nodded. Then start there, texts, voicemails, even deleted ones. Apps keep history longer than you think. A quiet resolve began to settle into my bones. For weeks, I'd been drowning in grief and confusion, letting the weight of betrayal sit heavy on my shoulders. But Helen, she was pulling me up from the undertow. We'll file a silent petition, she continued. No alerts to your daughter, no courtroom drama, not yet. Just a clean motion to suspend power of attorney and freeze contested assets until review. They won't even know you've spoken until it's too late. I nodded slowly, the gears turning. And the will. She smiled. One step at a time, we'll get there. But when we do, she reached across the table and rested her hand over mine, firm, warm, unwavering. At the reading, she said, you'll let them think you're broken. Let them dismiss you, silence you, pity you. I looked her in the eye, and then, Arthur, you'll speak. Claire's invitation came by text. Dinner tonight, Mark's grilling. Thought it'd be nice to have you over, Yellow Heart. I stared at the message for a while before replying, sure. She answered too fast, great, 6 p.m. The house looked the same, too clean, too curated. The porch had fresh flowers in matching pots, the kind you buy last minute to look thoughtful. Claire greeted me with a bright smile, arms open wide. Dad, you made it. She hugged me like a campaigner, quick and calculated. Mark waved from the grill. Hope you're hungry, old man. Made your favorite, steak and forgetfulness. I forced a smile. Sounds delicious. Inside, the dining table was already set. Candles lit. Wine glasses poured. Claire handed me a plate, kept talking fast about weather, news, nothing at all. It was the kind of dinner where every word had a double meaning. When I excused myself to wash up, I left my phone recording in my coat pocket by the hallway. From the bathroom, I could hear their voices, lower, tighter. She's going to call next week, Claire whispered. Once probate's finalized, it's ours. What about him? Mark asked. He's been quiet lately. You think he suspects anything? He doesn't even remember what day it is, Mark. Just keep being nice until it's done. We'll move him into assisted living after the paperwork clears. They laughed her laugh, my daughter. When I stepped back into the room, their conversation snapped shut like a trap. Claire was already smiling again. We were just saying how good it is to have you here, Dad. I sat down slowly. My hands shook under the table, but I steadied them on my thighs. Dinner passed in a haze of overcooked steak and undercooked lies. So, Mark said, cutting into his food, you still keeping that notebook of yours? Old men and their little journals, huh? Claire laughed too loud. Dad's always been a note-taker. I looked at my plate. Some things are worth remembering. Mark raised a brow. If you can. My fork paused in midair. For a second I nearly said something. Nearly stood up and told them I knew everything. That I had the letter, the recording, the documents. That Helen was already filing. But I didn't. I just chewed, swallowed, smiled. After dessert, Claire kissed my cheek and told me to get home safe. I nodded and left. In the car, I pulled out my phone and played the recording. Their voices, their laughter, the words probate, ours, assisted living. My hands trembled against the steering wheel. I stared out the windshield, streetlights blurring in the dark. They were building my exile behind my back, brick by brick. But I had the blueprint now. The courthouse smelled like dust and ink, the kind of air that holds old secrets. Helen led the way, her shoes clicking softly against the tile. We didn't speak much. Everything had already been said in the hours spent organizing documents, time-stamping audio files, and aligning the pieces like a slow, perfect game of chess. I carried the folder under my arm. Inside, the forged signature, the bank printouts, Claire's voicemail, the hallway recording, and my handwritten journal entries, each dated, each quiet, each damning. We filed the petition under a silent motion clause. It wouldn't trigger alerts. No letters, no calls, no courtroom spectacle, just paper slipping into the gears of justice. They won't see it coming, Helen whispered as we left the clerk's office. I nodded, that's the point. The days that followed were unsettling in their calm. Claire kept calling like nothing had happened, dropped off groceries, a new bath mat, even fresh-cut flowers, white lilies, my wife's favorite, as if she remembered. Hi, Dad, she chirped one morning, carrying a grocery bag to my door. I got your yogurt, the one with the blueberries. She set it down like a gift, smiled like I was her fragile little project. "You're being so strong through all of this," she said sweetly. "Mom would be proud." I wanted to laugh. Instead, I said, "Thank you, sweetheart, you're very thoughtful." She hugged me tight as if squeezing out the guilt. I stood there, arms loose at my side. After she left, I sat in my reading chair, fingers tracing the frayed edges of Margaret's quilt, the one she made during chemo. She had sewn the word steady into the corner, barely visible unless you knew where to look. "Justice isn't loud. It's steady," she used to say, her voice soft beside the fire. "Not a hammer, Arthur, a tide." I stared out the window as the wind curled through the trees. There was something powerful in the waiting, in letting them believe I was still grieving, still broken. Letting Claire perform her rehearsed kindness while the court clerk processed the truth in silence. I wasn't just bidding time, I was gathering weight. For years I had been the quiet one, the one who stepped back, made room, paid the bills, wrote the speeches, handed down the keys. Now I was learning how silence could cut deeper than rage. The phone buzzed. A message from Helen, petition confirmed, hearing set. They won't know until the summons drops. I didn't reply. I just stared at the words for a long moment, then turned off the screen. Outside, storm clouds gathered at the edge of the sky, not loud, not violent, but inevitable. I wore the suit Margaret always liked, navy blue with the silver cufflinks she gave me on our 40th anniversary. I'd polished my cane that morning, not because I needed it, but because appearances mattered today. Claire was already in the hallway outside the courtroom when I arrived. Her heels clicked nervously against the tile as she walked over, arms wide with a too bright smile. "Dad, you look nice," she said, brushing invisible lint off my shoulder. Then, lowering her voice, "Let's just get through this, okay? Please, don't speak unless asked. We don't need confusion right now." I looked at her, really looked. The smile didn't reach her eyes this time. There was tension in her jaw. She was afraid, though she didn't know why yet. "I understand," I said, voice calm. "I won't cause a scene." Inside the courtroom, the judge entered. Claire and Mark took their seats on the left side of the aisle. I sat to the right beside Helen, who gave me a small nod. Her briefcase rested between us, heavy with truth. Mr. Talbot stood and began reading the revised will, the one Claire had submitted. Same lies, same omissions. When he finished, the judge looked at me. "Mr. Whitmore, do you wish to respond to this filing?" Claire turned toward me quickly, shaking her head almost imperceptibly. "Dad." I stood slowly, pulled the folder from beneath my coat. "Yes, Your Honor, I'd like to submit supplemental evidence." The bailiff took the folder from my hand and passed it forward. The judge opened it. Inside were printed emails from Margaret to Helen discussing her final wishes, handwritten notes about the charitable clause, metadata logs showing forged timestamps, and a USB drive containing the audio of Claire and Mark laughing about keeping me calm until probate closed. Claire's voice played through the speakers. "He doesn't even remember what day it is, Mark. Just keep being nice until it's done." Mark's voice followed. "We'll move him into assisted living after the paperwork clears." Silence settled across the room like fog. Claire's face drained of color. Her lips parted, but no words came. Mark stammered, This is out of context. It was a joke." The judge held up a hand. "I'll decide what's context." I didn't look at Claire. I looked at the locket in my hand, fingers curled around it like armor. They wanted me silent. Today they'll hear every word. The judge turned to Mr. Talbot. "You filed the revised will. Were you aware of these documents?" Mr. Talbot's voice shook. "No, Your Honor. I was provided only the version Claire submitted." The judge set the folder down. "We'll recess. This court needs time to evaluate the legitimacy of the original will and consider allegations of fraud." I sat down slowly. Claire didn't move. Helen leaned over and whispered, "They never saw you coming." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The courtroom was colder that day, not from the air, but from the distance that had settled between us all. No more polite smiles, no more performance. Claire didn't look at me when the judge returned. Neither did Mark. Evan sat near the back, head down, hands clasped between his knees. I couldn't read him, not fully. I don't think he knew what side he belonged to anymore. The judge cleared his throat and spoke plainly. After thorough review of the submitted evidence, including original drafts, metadata verification, and audio recordings, this court finds that the revised will presented by Ms. Claire Whitmore is invalid. The original will, signed and dated by Margaret Elaine Whitmore, will be reinstated in full. My breath held in my throat. The estate will be divided according to Mrs. Whitmore's original intent, 50% to Mr. Arthur Whitmore, the remainder to be split equally between her children. Furthermore, Ms. Claire Whitmore's legal access to the trust, estate accounts, and power of attorney is hereby suspended pending a formal investigation into fraudulent filings and coercion. The courtroom didn't gasp. There was no outburst, just silence. Claire made a small, choked sound, then covered her face with both hands. The sound that came out of her wasn't rage. It was something raw, like a sob torn from the chest of a child who realized too late what she'd broken. "I'm sorry," she cried, voice thick and trembling. "Dad, I thought I didn't mean for." Her words unraveled into air. I didn't reply. Because some betrayals leave no words behind, only weight. Mark put an arm around her, but his expression stayed blank, like someone watching a deal fall through. I couldn't tell if he felt guilt or just inconvenience. Evan looked up once, eyes meeting mine, then quickly looked away. The judge stood. "This hearing is concluded." I rose slowly, my cane steady beneath my hand. The rubber tip tapped once against the hardwood floor, loud in the stillness. Then again. And again. The sound echoed as I made my way to the door. No one followed. No one called after me. I didn't look back. I didn't feel triumph, no satisfaction, just the ache of a wound cauterized too late. Justice, I realized, isn't a celebration. It's a correction. A heavy one. When I stepped into the hallway, Helen was waiting. She didn't smile, just nodded once. She understood. Outside, the wind was sharp, the sun pale against the clouds. I pulled my coat tighter, adjusted the grip on my cane, and kept walking. Free, but hollow. The earth had settled, but grief never really did. It just learned where to sit. I walked the familiar path to Margaret's grave, cane tapping rhythmically along the stone path, the same path we used to stroll after church. The wind carried the scent of distant rain and early lilacs. She would have loved that. It had been 6 months since the courtroom. The estate had been divided as she intended, half to me, the rest split evenly. Claire hadn't contested the ruling. She couldn't. The investigation into her forged documents was still ongoing. Her letters began arriving not long after the verdict, folded apologies filled with what-ifs, maybes, and memories reimagined. I read the first 2. Then I stopped. She said she missed me. She said she made mistakes. She said she never meant to hurt me. But betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a whisper in a kitchen, a signature on a line, a silence where a voice should have stood. I didn't write her back. Instead, I made a donation, a quiet one, to the Women's Legal Aid Fund. In Margaret's name. It felt right. She always said, if you have a voice, use it to lift someone else. I stood before her gravestone now, hand in my coat pocket. I brought a letter of my own. I unfolded it slowly, fingers brushing the edge. "Margaret," I read softly, "you were right. Silence isn't weakness, it's waiting, listening, choosing when to speak and when to strike the right note. I almost let them take everything we built. Almost. But I remembered what you said and I found my voice. They told me not to speak, but my voice saved everything." I knelt, knees creaking, and placed the letter at the base of the stone. Beneath the bouquet of lilies I brought her favorite. The sky above shifted, letting a shaft of sunlight cut through the gray. I stayed there for a moment, listening to nothing but the breeze brushing past the trees, the far-off hum of wind across granite. When I returned home, I went to the shelf by the window. On it sat her framed photograph, the one where she's laughing, holding a cup of tea with both hands like it was made of gold. And beside it now stood the original will, framed. I had pressed it between museum-grade glass, not to gloat, but to remember, to remind myself what truth looks like on paper, what love sounds like in legal ink. The sunlight caught the edge of her signature just right, and for a brief second it shimmered like a promise, steady, quiet, and still standing. They told me not to speak, but I did. And that voice, the one they tried to bury, became the thing that saved me.